You ever feel like society's falling apart? The things you once believed in to be sacred or infallible or unbreakable are now falling apart before your very eyes. There's this invisible, corrupting, evil force snaking its way through the very fabric of society itself. The old guard, which you were brought up to believe is fighting for the sacred ideals that hold society together and for the essence of humanity, is now just as subject as anyone else to the influence of this invisible force. The person who notices this and vows to continue fighting for the essential principles that hold society together is vilified and cast aside by the rest of society. Oh no, I'm talking about the Order 1886. That's what... I don't know what you thought. I was talking about the Order 1886, the video game. Yeah, definitely no metaphors that could be drawn here to real life at all. Not whatsoever. So the Order 1886 is an interesting game. Apparently they're thinking about working on a sequel, which is why I decided to make this video in the first place. It's a PS4 exclusive, and it's like, it's all right. It suffers from what I would call the Assassin's Creed problem, which is that you have this interesting world and this interesting backdrop, but then you fail to execute on it in a way that feels meaningful or good or important in any way. It's the reason why, while I really liked the gameplay and the essential idea of being an assassin in Assassin's Creed 1 and Brotherhood, which are the ones that I played, and Black Flag, and a little bit of Odyssey before I got bored of it and quit. But the story, which is really important to me as a gamer, TM, wasn't good enough or compelling enough for me to get into. The Order 1886 is a heavily narrative-driven story. The Order 1886's gameplay is sort of like The Last of Us gameplay in that it's very bare bones. Yeah, The Last of Us has a little bit of crafting, it has a little bit of stealth, it has a little bit of action, but it's really not doing anything terribly crazy or unique or over the top. You're going from place to place, killing zombies and moving on. But that gameplay serves as a really good framework for telling the story that the game wants to tell. The Order 1886 is a cover-based shooter, and the thing about cover-based shooters is that it's just so bare bones. You really need to support it with something else. I got the sense with this game that they were like, hey, we want to make Assassin's Creed, but we're not making a stealth game. Okay, hey, wait, what if we made Uncharted? But wait, no, can't make Uncharted because we can't do the over-the-top, super cinematic action shit. What if we just made The Last of Us?
I think we can make The Last of Us.
So this game is The Last of Us, but like in the sense that the main three pillars of the gameplay are narrative, walking around and interacting with shit, and cover-based shooting. I mean, The Last of Us has more than that, but that's what this game has. And it's like, that's fair enough. I mean, that's what Gears of War is, and Gears of War 5 was... Gears of Wars. Why do I keep saying that? Gears of War. Is it Gears of War? And I mean, that's fair enough. That's basically what Gears of War 5 was, and that game was almost good. I probably pissed someone off saying that. I mean, Gears of War 5 was fine. It just wasn't the greatest thing ever made like people were making it out to be. I definitely would prefer to play that over the Order 1886 again. But why is that? I mean, the world in Order 1886 is just so really freaking cool. You're basically playing as the Ultra Police.
2 niggas in the front, 2 niggas in the back. That's 4 niggas riding strap in Grandpa's Cadillac.
Which has access to technology that no one else has even thought of in this time period that this is taking place in, which is, I don't know what time period this game is taking place in. I tried to Google search it or something, but really no one seems to know when this game takes place. It's really strange. Like, why would they have this crazy unique world and not give a basic framework for the time period that this game is supposed to? But anyway, you have access to all this super cool technology, and when you actually get to play the game, you don't really get to use any of that technology yourself.
Locking on beacon, releasing anchor. Fulton deployment in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Incoming! All devices off!
1.
You get to see it, sure, but the most you get is like a cool new gun. But those guns really don't function any differently from their, modern warfare game counterpart. You get your flamethrower, you get your shotgun, you get your assault rifle, and you get, I guess what's the most interesting thing is the arc gun. I just finished playing Prey for the first time, and it was really good. You know, the combat in that game was really cool, even if I hated the fucking enemies half of the time. It was still interesting how I had to choose and mix and match different weapon types in order to get through certain areas. And I went through the entire game without using any of the psychic abilities. So if I got up to a certain enemy, I had to use the electric gun to stun them, and then the shotgun to knock them down, or I would use the gel gun to stop them in place and then just whack them with my wrench. You know, different things like that, BioShock style, that really spice up the gameplay. You expect to see some of that in the Order 1886, but half of the time you're just cover-based shooting with regular dudes. It's the Resident Evil 6 problem, where you're supposed to be going up against these cool sci-fi fantasy enemies, but they're basically just people who hide behind cover and shoot you. And then the actual gunplay doesn't really evolve. When you actually do get to use a cool sci-fi weapon, it's really rare. And again, it's just a slightly different version of a gun that we would find in any modern day shooter. But gameplay's not over just yet. The conceit of this game is that it's a vampire game. It's got vampires in it. And the vampires all fucking suck. The other things you fight are also werewolves. But for a game about vampires and werewolves, there are only 4 fights. Count them, 4 fights with a vampire and or a werewolf in this entire game. And 2 of them are just QuickTime event boss fights, which, to be fair, are kinda cool. But the other 2 have the most frustrating pseudo-stealth mechanics of all time. You basically just run around a dark room until one of them tries to attack you, and then you do a QuickTime button press to dodge out of the way, and then you shoot them and kill them, but you have to finish them off, otherwise they're not gonna die. But that's it. I mean, I guess technically after the first werewolf thing, there's like a little chase sequence if you want to count that as a different encounter for some reason, but that would still only be 3 werewolf fights in the entire game. The coolest parts of the game are probably the vampire fights. I think they're actually, you know, kind of unique. It reminds me of Uncharted 4, the final boss in that game, where it's basically an elongated QuickTime event, but it feels right. It feels like a QuickTime event that you actually have a decent amount of control over. I think that's probably the best way to handle a cinematic boss fight, where you're not really allowed to have full control over the character. Before the first vampire fight, there's a little bit of a stealth chase sequence, and it's very short-lived, but I think it's probably the best part of the game. It's just so cinematic and atmospheric and very well done.
Swine!
There's a part where this game makes you think that, wait, maybe this thing is stalking you around this old hospital, and you have to kind of sneak your way around it. No, that doesn't actually happen. It's basically just a long interactive cutscene, but this part is so atmospheric and so unique that I was really like, whoa, I like this.
I can smell you.
Fuck.
I wish the game was more of this right here. Even if it was like a Detroit Become Human or Heavy Rain style interactive movie, I think that would be better than the cover-based shooting nonsense for most of the game. I'm talking like 90% of the game, and it's a really short game.
Damn it, a padlock! Whatever am I going to do?
How strong really are padlocks? Like, I don't know. I know I hate that BS where you just shoot a padlock and it bursts open. I've never believed that that's actually scientifically possible. But like, how strong really are padlocks that even this vampire knows, oh, I'm not getting past this one. This is too much for me. The real issue is, right, you get this boss fight, and when I first played this game years and years ago, I thought, hey, this type of enemy is going to pop up like all over the place now, and I'm going to have to deal with them when they show up. Clearly, a gun is not enough to defeat these things, so even though it makes like very little sense to get in melee distance with this thing, it's probably going to be a mechanic that's going to show up over and over again. And so while that may get exhausting after a while, I could be really cool with doing this a couple of times. But no, this is one of 2 vampire boss fights that you get in the entire game. The last one being the last boss of the game. Like literally the last thing you fight is this thing. Well, not this one exactly, but it's the same kind of boss fight. But you know, that said, they're still really cool boss fights. And if this game just kind of embraced its interactive movie nature rather than doing the gunplay shit, I would have really liked it. But if the game was just completely wed to having shallow cover-based shooting mechanics, then why don't we fight more werewolves and more vampires with the cover-based shooting mechanics? If they added some stealth mechanics in, like The Last of Us, then you could do a lot of really cool things with enemies that don't just hide behind cover and shoot back. The dumbest thing is, right? They have a stealth section in this game, but it's not with the werewolves or the vampires. Like I said, the werewolf section where they come at you and attack, that's a pseudo-stealth section. You're not actually hiding. They already know where you are. It's just a really dark room, and you have to dodge them when they come. But there's a real stealth section in the real-life game that I'm really life playing, and it's with humans. And the conceit is that one of them has a key, and I'm not sure if it's the same guy every time, or if it's a random guy, or if it's just like... What I think is actually the case is that you have to kill all of them and the last guy has the key, which is just utter BS, but I think that's how it actually happens. But I could totally be wrong about that. But hey, you know, it would have been really cool if we got stealth mechanics with the goddamn werewolves or vampires, which the thing even says it can smell him. Can you imagine sound mechanics like The Last of Us where you have to lure it away from you even though it can smell you? Maybe somehow you have to find a way to mask your smell. It's so mind-boggling to me that they have a game where the conceit is, hey, this society is being ravaged by these cryptid creatures, and you're part of this order whose main job is to stop them, and you barely get to see them. So that brings us to the other 2 pillars of gameplay for the Order 1886, which are narrative and walking around collecting a bunch of shit. Now, I'm having a hard time figuring out why walking around collecting a bunch of shit is really sort of interesting to me in games like Uncharted or The Last of Us, but it's not really that interesting to me in this game. Hell, even in Prey, I would like read through the emails. In Dragon Age and other RPGs, I read through some of the lore entries, not all of them, but some of them. And I think that's how I'm going to rationalize this. You know, sometimes you're playing an RPG and you're really interested in this one quest or this one character, and you finally get to like their den where all their stuff is. So you sit there and you read through all of the text entries that they have, all of the log entries that they have hidden around this den. But you might go to a different, like some kind of common area, maybe a forum or something, and you see a note that's just lying on the ground, and maybe you don't necessarily read it, or you skim through it or something because it really doesn't interest you all that much. The context matters so much, and just the context of this world is not interesting enough for me to care about these little entries. That's not necessarily true. The context of the story is not interesting enough for me to care about these entries. The context of the world is actually really cool, and I'm very fascinated by this world. Fucking 1886 super cops with modern technology, that is really interesting. So the story is obviously centered around this ancient order, the Super Cop Society of England. And they're governed by these ancient chivalric principles like fidelity and staying true to the order above all else. The main character of the story is Sir Galahad, but the story also follows 3 other characters. Percival, who is Galahad's sort of mentor type figure, Igraine, and Lafayette. And these characters are so very one note. I think their actors portray them really well. I'm not knocking that, but the characters themselves are just really shallow. Igraine is the tough, strong woman character.
Sure you don't need help, love?
Do you mean a strong man to take control of things?
That's right.
Just stay out of our way. I'd hate for you to get shot by mistake.
Lafayette is the youthful, passionate, flirty character who's just gotten started with this whole order stuff and slowly comes of age and learns that things are a little more difficult than they seem.
I am a lover of liberty, mon ami.
A proper knight must learn to curb his passions.
Without passion, monsieur. A man cannot fight.
And Percival is the secretive older character who feels like things are not as they should be, but doesn't tell anyone anything. I would say Galahad and Percival are way more fleshed out than everyone else. Igraine and Lafayette are really the two shallowest of the foursome. There are a couple other major characters, and they do have like a degree more of personality to them, but the issue is not really even their personality, it's just that they're so freaking boring.
Centuries have passed, but our order has remained steadfast in its sacred mission to preserve the balance between man and half-breed. Such was the quest of our founder, King Arthur. May his name be forever resplendent.
Is it true? Did the Lord Chancellor fight by Arthur's side?
That is the legend.
Today, that balance is threatened with grave upset by a new contagion.
The story uses the most uninteresting aspects of this whole order thing, and it's told with the most uninteresting exposition.
The plague of lichen infestation that has infected our city will only grow more intolerable.
The Lord Chancellor will thus agree to the urgency of a mission into Whitechapel.
Whitechapel is a matter for the civil authorities.
When the noble Arthur sought to contest for truage with the Roman Emperor Lucius, he did not trouble himself with issues of jurisdiction.
Do not presume to quote history to me, Sir Percival. I've seen more of history than you shall ever know. I remind the knights here assembled that the threat to this order comes not only from without, but within.
Like, political intrigue is cool and all, but when you barely establish a baseline for me to, like, get in on the political intrigue and have some side that I'm actually rooting for, then I can't get into all the high-minded, politics behind it all.
How many of us will make the journey to America?
Lord Barrett, Lord Darwin, and myself.
I've heard many great things about the Agamemnon, Lord Hastings.
She is the finest the United India Company has ever built. I can promise you a pleasant and speedy journey across the Atlantic.
Can we expect your presence at the launch, Sir Lucan?
Would be my honor to see you off on your maiden voyage, my lords.
Sir Lucan, if I may.
If you would permit me, my lords.
Of course, Sir Percival.
The characters' relationships are even really barely touched upon. You know that they're all part of this order, but you don't really know how they all know each other or how they've all, gotten to get used to each other like this. There are lines thrown in here and there, and I could find them if I wanted to, but honestly, it's really just a line here saying, oh, we fought together at this point.
Friend Mallory has always been something of a rogue operative.
I've never known a better man.
Still, I shall rely on you to be call it a sobering influence.
Sebastian and I have long been partners. I trust him with my life.
A little restraint would not be ill-advised.
To the point that I didn't even know Igraine and Galahad had like a thing for each other until she almost dies halfway through the story.
I'm telling you, I'm fine now.
You still need some time to recuperate.
I assure you, Grey, I'm perfectly well.
Will there ever be a time when you will heed my advice, Izzy?
You know the answer to that question. But you would have to obtain Father's blessing first.
The entire beginning of the game just presents her as a strong female character, and that's it. And just the side characters are all super one note as well, to the point where it's a little distracting actually. By side characters I mean extras, like this woman here that Lafayette tries to flirt with.
I assure you, mademoiselle, that only the vow of fidelity prevents me from accepting your invitation.
Oh, Marquis, you mustn't leave now.
Unfortunately, my lady, my duty compels me elsewhere.
Like if you're flirting successfully with someone, there has to be some sort of perceived chemistry there. Otherwise, I'm just not going to believe it. Don Juan over here is so smooth, but this woman doesn't feel like she actually has any sort of personality behind her at all. And I get that she's just an extra, and also this is highfalutin British society, but it happens again. This dude freaking sees these two guys, first of all, acting super suspiciously. Doesn't react, really. They hit the other guy with an apple. Still doesn't react, but fair enough.
Oi!
Then they choke the guy out, and I get that he gets a bribe for it, but he barely reacts in the first place. He might as well have not even been there. I don't even know why he was in that scene. This really isn't relevant, but I always find it distracting that this guy doesn't take their knives, just their guns. Like, no weapons allowed in this establishment, but those gigantic fuck-off knives, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, what damage could those possibly do? And then there's this scene, the infamous.
Get out of there!
Oh! Hello? Oh. Oh.
I know a lot of these are supposed to be comedy beats, but the reactions are just so distracting. Because weirdly, these are the only moments of personality that we really get in the game, and they feel so stunted and weird. Like, why did she react so late? Watching it back over, I was like, I could see in a certain circumstance how maybe that reaction made sense, but it just comes off as more distracting than anything else. Also, random nitpick, I just noticed that they said no weapons in the establishment, and then the dude had a freaking gun just waiting there on the counter, and no one cared.
Landlord! A drink! A drink, goddammit you! Absinthe!
This is a side note. I've tried absinthe before, and it gets you fucked up. It's like 120 proof at the minimum. This woman, I would say, is probably the most interesting character, and I sort of wish the game did more with her and Galahad. She comes across as sort of the wise old sage kind of character who knows more about the world and about the actual order than even the people in the order do. Even with me thinking she's like not that bad, I can't think of any like major moment she had in the story. Off the top of my head, I'm really struggling to think of what she did besides just reveal the truth of the order to Galahad. She didn't have any cool epic moments. She didn't have any real character development reveals or anything like that. It was just sort of like, hey, I know more about this, so I'm just going to tell you about it. Or not tell you, but like actually show you proof and whatnot.
There are things worse than Death Knight. Much worse. And if it is mine you seek in your misguided quest, then so be it. My death is a worthy sacrifice. Things are not as they seem. The company's secrets are well kept, even from the Order.
What secrets? I do not have time for games.
There is little I can say to sway your convictions. But there are things I can show you.
There are basically 5 really cool and interesting parts of the game, though interesting has a little bit of an asterisk next to it, because is it interesting because of the story, or is it just interesting because it's a cool visual thing that they did? Like, graphically, this game is stunning, and it's well acted, and they did a lot, like, creating this really awesome looking world. I would say one of the most interesting parts is the first part of the game where you literally wake up and you're being waterboarded. Or not waterboarded, what do you call when you dunk someone's head in a water? I guess it's just called dunking their head in water, huh? But basically you're being tortured and you're imprisoned and you have to escape. That's a pretty cool sequence. You don't really know anyone at that point or what the stakes are or anything like that, but it's just cool to have that little escape sequence. And it really does build intrigue for the rest of the story, which doesn't get fulfilled very much later on.
You forget, Lord Chancellor. I'm as good as dead already.
Then the next cool part, I would say, is the vampire stalking you around the hospital. But again, that lasts only about 5 to 7 minutes. It's really just a long interactive cutscene. You're not actually being stalked by anything. So it's a little misleading in that sense. So I guess knowing that one might not be an interesting moment, but it might just be cool because of the backdrop of it all. Another cool but not necessarily interesting moment is when they are rappelling off the side of a blimp. It's just so like cinematographically what? Like just cinematically speaking, it's so really well done and it looks so astonishingly cool. It's probably the most memorable moment from this game for me. That blimp section is also kind of interesting because there's a part of it where you have to like snipe a person before they assassinate General Hastings, and it almost feels like a Call of Duty game, like a mission from a Call of Duty game, which is not really, it's not like a good or a bad thing. It's just sort of interesting. And I actually kind of dig that part. I would say the fourth coolest part is when Galahad is fighting his way across the bridge after he goes into a mad rage.
Gray, where are you going?
To finish what we started.
This is no time for vengeance! Come to your senses! Gray, stop!
Really, like, the bridge part itself, it's just more cover-based shooting, and it's nothing too over the top or crazy. You do get like a really powerful weapon that you can just mow people down with, which was a cool twist. His actor performs it so well, and just him being filled with this obviously gripping and enthralling rage and sadness. Those are the most interesting moments of his character for me, and it almost is enough to actually compel me to keep playing. But knowing how it pays off, it's just really not all worth it.
Where's the Indian woman? Where is she? Where is she? Where? Tell me! Tell me!
The final coolest part of the game, I would say, is the ending of the game, but I'm going to get to that in a second. So what happens in this game? I'm going to start past the intro part because that part takes place well into the game's story. Basically, you're a member of this order, this ancient order, and you play as Sir Galahad. You go down to take care of these Bedlamites who are rebelling and trying to escape. I don't know exactly who Bedlamites are. I've gotten the sense both times that I played this game that they're just insane asylum patients who are trying to escape. Maybe it's like they're put in an insane asylum because they're thought that they're going to be turned into werewolves or vampires or something, and it's just a precaution taken by the government or something. And they're escaping because they feel like they've been unjustly imprisoned. I don't know. I really have no idea. They just seem like normal dudes who have guns, and now you have to shoot them. That's what it seems like. So as the game is going on, you start finding out about a secret threat to the Order and to General Hastings, who knows about the Order. But you're not really sure what that threat is. One part of the Order suggests that this threat is coming from these rebels.
Down with the Queen! Down with the Queen! Down with Empire! Down with Empire! Down with the Queen! Down with the Queen! Down with Empire! Down with Empire! Down with the
So that leads to the really, really cool blimp section where you have to rappel off the side of a blimp and stop this assassination from happening from these rebels. You manage to stop the assassination, but you don't manage to stop the blimp from exploding and crashing down.
Hold your fire! There's no time, Percival! We have to stop him!
Trust me, Grayson. Listen to me, lad. Stand down.
It's too late. Sebastian?
Friend. You don't have to do this.
Which ends up killing Sir Percival, Galahad's mentor, or sort of a father figure in a sense. Igraine's brother and the son of the leader of this entire order says, hey, whatever Percival was investigating before he died, you should drop it. But Galahad doesn't want to drop it. He thinks he needs to figure out what's going on.
Too many questions remain, Alistair. I intend to find answers. Mallory's death will be avenged. Do not fall prey to dark thoughts of retribution. That way madness lies.
So Galahad ends up going to the rebels to figure out what exactly is happening. The rebels have it on pretty good authority that there's a secret faction within the government that is trying to, corrupt it from the inside.
I need some answers.
Answers? Is that why you killed all my men? Death always follows in your path.
And yours will be next if you don't give me what I need.
You'll have to excuse me if your offer doesn't entice me. I don't respond well to threats.
Then you're of no use to me.
Do your worst.
Do you worst. I mean, I can't fault them for a misspelling. I really can't. It's just funny, you know? The rebel leader takes Galahad to the East India Trading Company's warehouse where they find...
Look, Hard Knight. See the evil we both fight against.
Vampires. It can't be. How?
The half-breeds are consolidating their power. With the protection of the Lycans in your land, Hastings and his vampire ilk are spreading disease throughout your...
Lord Hastings, he can't be one of them.
They destroy the crates, and Galahad takes this information back to the Order, where the leader of the Order's son says, hey, we need to investigate this more before we jump to any conclusions. So the leader's son, whose name is Alistair, goes with Galahad to Lord Hastings' mansion. That's where we get to the fucking stealth section from before, which I hate. The one with the humans and not with the werewolves or the vampires. You kill a bunch of Lord Hastings' men with really no second thought. I think Alistair mentions, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill them, but Galahad's no, the ends justify the means, basically.
Racer, I think it unwise to eliminate company guards until we have proof.
There is no time, Alistair. You have to trust me. This is the only way.
And then when you get inside the mansion, you have one of the most annoying shootout with shotgunners in this entire fucking game. The shotgunners in this game suck ass. They suck mega ass. Once inside, you find evidence that incriminates the United India Company. But then you also find out that Lord Hastings is a vampire. So Lord Hastings has Galahad and the rebel leader, whose name is Lakshmi. I didn't just have to look that up at all. He has them taken away by the guards. Lakshmi escapes somehow, and Galahad gets taken away by the Order and gets tortured like we see in the beginning of the game. Basically cut to the escape sequence, and he meets up with Lakshmi again and with Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla, the real-life person, is a character in this game. I forgot to mention that because it wasn't really relevant to this point. He basically makes all the cool technology that the Order uses. It's sort of like an alternate history version where his technology turns out to be like the really cool stuff that we use today. So anyway, he's trapped within the Order grounds, and they're eventually going to find out that he's a confidant. And Galahad is like, I have to go and save him. I have to do this. You go in through the underground to get to Nikola Tesla's lab and try to save him. When you finally get there, you're confronted by Alistair, who's like, hey, you shouldn't be here. By the way, also, I'm a vampire. Oops, sorry. Let it slip a little bit there. Okay, this is just a side note, but I've been going over this footage over and over, and I just realized the two boss fights that you have in this game are with werewolves, not vampires. For some reason, my dumb caveman brain thought that the game, when it said half-breeds, was talking about werewolves and vampires, and like these guys with a more sophisticated transformation, I thought they were vampires. The only two vampires that you see are Lord Hastings, who you don't get to fight, and the vampires in the crates at the United India Company, which you also don't get to fight. Also, I kept calling it East India Company. I don't know why. Again, dumb caveman. Certified caveman brain right here. Kind of makes it even dumber to me that you actually don't get to fight any vampires in the game. Anyway, moving on. You do battle with Alistair the vampire, and again, this one I really like. It's that cinematic sort of quick time event, but also sort of not quick time event, where you feel like you have enough control that it's interesting, but it's also pretty cinematic. And then you land a killing blow on Alistair, and he's pretty much knocked out.
How can you justify the atrocities your kind have committed?
My kind are no more evil than yours.
What of your sister? Your father? Was it all a lie?
And then Alistair's father, who is again the leader of the entire Order, comes in and he's like, hey man, you just killed my fucking son. What gives?
I've always known. I rescued him from the massacre of his family.
Confess this to the Council, Lord Chancellor. It is the only way to make amends for the havoc that has been unleashed.
I cannot! The revelation would shake our Order to its very foundations.
So I am to be sacrificed. How many more must die to ensure an eternal silence?
Isabeau and the Council must never discover the truth, lest all you hold dear perish.
Do not ask this of me.
Finish what you have begun, and vanish!
And then the game just ends. It just ends. This is the only time in my entire life of playing video games where I literally had to lower the controller and say out loud to myself, when no one else was in the room, that's it? You shoot Alistair and the credits roll as if anything has happened. Meanwhile, the game was just starting to get really interesting and good. I was like, okay, this is it. This is the turning point. This is where shit gets really real. If we had another half of the game to go, I'm sure it would have really taken off from there. But no, it's over. It's just over. All you get is like a Marvel stinger at the end where Galahad's now Batman looking over at the city. I really wasn't interested until I played through it again. I was like, no, yeah, this world is super freaking cool. And this game is gorgeous. And there's clearly a good team behind this. They just got to capitalize on what this world is trying to do. You have a vampire story, but it's nowhere near the level of Vampire the Masquerade. So am I hopeful for an Order 1887 or Order 1886 Part 2? I don't know. I don't know. Bye, guys. Have a good one. Hope everyone's being safe. And thank you for watching. I don't know.